The city of Newport Hills was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to be missing. Mansions with flawless gardens, cars worth more than small islands, and parties that looked like something straight out of a movie. It was during one of those glittering nights, in a ballroom perched atop a skyscraper, that everything began. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, the champagne was French, and the city's elite floated through a sea of rehearsed smiles. At the center of the room, surrounded by business tycoons, models, and politicians, stood Nathaniel Blake. At 32, he was the youngest CEO in the history of Blake Industries. Handsome, cold, arrogant, and ridiculously rich. He was so used to winning that losing wasn't even a concept he entertained. That night, bored as usual, he heard the one challenge that would change everything. "Nate, if you're so damn good, why not try winning over Emma Carter?" The name made some men laugh nervously, others swallow hard. Emma was different. A waitress at Rusty Joe's Diner, the oldest and most beloved joint in town, famous for her sharp tongue and utter disdain for any man in a suit. No one understood why she still worked there, turning down every offer that came her way. But everyone knew one thing: Emma didn't bow to anyone. She was unpredictable, intense. A storm wrapped in a 26-year-old woman's body. The kind of challenge Nate wasn't sure he could win, and that's exactly why he couldn't resist. "Deal. I'll make her say in a month, even if it's at the altar." The bet was sealed with laughter and clinking glasses. But Nate wasn't laughing inside. For the first time, something inside him lit up. It wasn't desire. It was curiosity, maybe even fear. The next day, he showed up at the diner where Emma worked, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and his signature, practice smile. He ordered coffee and pancakes. Beaming with the confidence of someone who believed his charm was irresistible, he wasted no time. "Emma, would you have dinner with me?" She didn't smile, didn't fall for the act, and didn't accept the invite. She tossed the change on the counter with disdain and said, "What do you really want, Prince Charming? A bigger ego or just another story to brag about?" And that's when Nate realized she was the one thing he couldn't buy. And for that reason alone, he had to have her. The plan became an obsession. He sent flowers, left anonymous notes, came back to the diner just to hear her snarky comebacks. Emma noticed the effort, but held her ground. She knew how to play the game too. Little by little, she started accepting tiny invitations, just to see how far he'd go. Their first date was at a street festival. No fancy restaurant, no luxury car. Nate showed up in jeans and a baseball cap, bought churros, and let Emma pick the song at the dance circle. She danced. He tried. They laughed so hard their faces hurt. For the first time, he didn't feel in control. And she felt free. From then on, they met weekly. Then, almost daily. Emma took him to places he'd never seen before. A second-hand bookstore, an open-air movie night, a 24-hour diner where they shared fries and childhood stories. He introduced her to his friends, who laughed at the whole thing. Nate, in love with a waitress? The world must be ending. But Emma just smiled, unbothered. And Nate? He didn't care. One day, as she lay across the car seat laughing at a terrible joke, Nate looked at her differently. "Would you marry me?" he asked, half joking. She smiled but didn't. A week later, he got down on one knee at the same diner where they met. She held her breath, confused. "This isn't just another joke?" she asked. He smiled softly and said, "Emma, I've never been more serious in my life." The customers clapped. And with tears in her eyes, she said yes. Not because she needed him, but because, for the first time, she felt truly seen. The wedding was set for a month later. No extravagance. No packed cathedral. Emma wanted something simple. Nate wanted something real. They settled on a middle ground, a renovated industrial warehouse in the heart of Newport Hills, with string lights overhead, a live folk band, and one long wooden table surrounded by real friends, not just millionaires, but also her co-workers from Rusty Joe's, who she insisted on inviting. On her walk to the altar, Emma wore a simple white dress with lace sleeves and sneakers. Nate, nervous for the first time in years, didn't know what to do with his hands. His heart beat faster than in any boardroom. When she walked in, the world seemed to slow down. There was no movie soundtrack, no fake tears. Just his eyes locked on hers. And for the first time, he didn't see the woman who helped him win a bet. He saw the woman who had won him. "Are you sure?" she whispered as she reached the altar. "I'm more sure about you than I've ever been about myself," he replied. The officiant asked the questions, and they both said, "I do." But the kiss never came. Emma turned her face. He didn't push. The ceremony ended with polite applause and an odd silence between them. Something lingered in the air. A wait. A question unspoken. The reception was light-hearted, dancing, drunk friends, awkward toasts. Emma laughed when a friend shouted, "He has no idea what he's getting into." Nate just looked at her with a smile that was part fear, part awe. They left hand in hand, but in silence. Back at the mansion, everything felt too big, too cold. Emma glanced around, uneasy. In the bedroom, he tried to break the silence. "You look beautiful." She didn't answer. She walked to the window, arms crossed, as if trying to run from something inside her. Then slowly she turned. "I need to tell you something." Nate nodded, serious. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a second. "I've never been with anyone before." Silence. Time seemed to pause. "Never?" he asked, more surprised than he expected. "Never," she confirmed. "I never trusted anyone. Never wanted to give myself to anyone." She looked small now. Fragile. No sarcasm. No armor. Just truth. Nate stepped closer, but didn't touch her. "Do you trust me now?" Her scared eyes met his, and she nodded. He turned off the lights, took off his jacket, and lay beside her, without touching. "Then we'll just stay here like this. No rush. I'll only touch you when you feel ready." She looked at him in the dark, chest tight. For the first time, a man respected her more than he desired her. And there, side by side, no kiss, no touch, they fell asleep like two souls just beginning to recognize each other. The bet didn't matter anymore. The battle between them was turning into something new. Something they couldn't yet name, but that had already begun to bloom in the quiet rhythm of their hearts. The days that followed their wedding night were unlike anything Emma and Nate had imagined. There were no forced romantic gestures, no grand declarations of love, no empty promises. There was silence, and a strange, mutual sense of care lingering in the air. Emma would wake before sunrise, walk barefoot through the garden of the mansion, wearing a hoodie and holding a warm cup of coffee in her hands. Nate watched her from the second-floor balcony, unnoticed, just trying to figure out this woman who seemed to have built walls around her heart, walls he wanted, for the first time in his life, to climb without rushing. It was on a quiet Tuesday night, after a dinner where they barely spoke a word, that everything changed. Nate was in the music room, gently pressing the keys of the old piano he'd inherited from his mother. Emma happened to pass by in the hallway and paused, silently. He had no idea she was listening. But she stayed. She sat on the floor just outside the doorway and listened for nearly half an hour. When he finally stopped playing, her voice broke the stillness. "That was beautiful. I never pictured you playing something so lovely." Nate jumped slightly but smiled. "And I never pictured you listening without criticizing." She laughed. And that laugh, genuine and unguarded, was like sunlight pouring through a forgotten window. That night they sat face to face. For the first time since their wedding, they talked with no masks. Emma opened up about her absent father, the mother who had to be stronger than any woman should, and the fears she'd carried since she was 15. Nate, in turn, confessed that despite the money and fame, he'd never truly felt loved. "People want me," he said, "but they don't really see me." With tears in her eyes, she replied, "Maybe that's because you hide behind all of it." He didn't argue. He just stayed quiet, really listening for the first time. The connection deepened in the smallest gestures. The next morning, Emma left him a note with his coffee. Nate placed a book on her nightstand with a handwritten dedication inside. They started watching movies together on the couch, sharing the same blanket. They laughed at the cheesy parts, laughed at each other, laughed about the past. One night, in the middle of all that laughing, she laid her head on his shoulder. What had started as a silent agreement slowly became an unexpectedly sweet routine. Nate began working less, skipping meetings and canceling full schedules just to have coffee with Emma out on the balcony. She, in turn, swapped her solitary morning walks in the garden for lazy conversations in bed, with long kisses and soft giggles over how surreal it all felt. "Who would have thought Mr. Corporate would end up being my husband?" she'd tease. "And who would have thought the most stubborn woman in the state would take my last name?" he'd shoot back. Emma had started calling him idiot affectionately. Nate had started falling harder every time she hit him with one of her sharp comebacks. Nate's friends, once skeptical, began to notice the shift. "You're different, man," one business partner told him. "You know that's dangerous, right?" Feeling happy. Nate just smiled, like he was holding on to a secret. What no one knew, not even Emma, was that love had caught him completely off guard. He no longer thought about the bet. Couldn't even recall the dare that started it all. All he thought about was her. How she mumbled in her sleep. How she organized silverware in silence when she was nervous. How she pretended to be strong, but trembled every time he hugged her from behind. But it wasn't all perfect. Emma still carried wounds. Fears that didn't heal overnight. Sometimes she'd pull away, build barriers, go quiet for hours. Nate gave her space, but it still hurt. One of those days, when she locked herself in the bedroom and cried without a clear reason, he slipped a note under the door. "You don't have to be strong every day. It's okay to hurt, with me here." She cried harder. That same night, she walked into his room in silence, crawled into bed, and whispered, voice shaking, "I don't know how you did it, but you broke me." He didn't say a word. He just pulled her close and held her tightly. And in that embrace, she finally let go. The first kiss came a few days later, completely unplanned. They were cooking together. Nate had flour all over his face, and Emma was laughing at how hopeless he was with dough. In the middle of the mess, she stepped closer to brush a thread off his shirt, and he instinctively placed his hands on her waist. Their eyes locked. Smiles faded. The kiss was slow, tender, like something they'd been saving for a lifetime. There were no doubts anymore. They were in love. That night, Emma walked into his room without a word. Her eyes weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for shelter. Nate was already in bed, reading, but when he saw her at the door, barefoot, hair loose, vulnerable, he knew something had changed. She walked slowly to the bed and sat beside him, eyes on the floor. "Tonight, I don't want to sleep alone," she whispered. Nate didn't rush to react. He simply closed the book and sat up, looking at her calmly. "Are you sure?" he asked, knowing this wasn't about the physical, it was emotional. She nodded, eyes glassy. The touch was gentle, respectful. Their hands met like they were asking permission to exist together. She trembled. So did he. The kiss was different, unhurried, unpolished, filled with honest, raw longing. Nate laid her down carefully, like something sacred. Every button undone came with a soft, "Is this okay?" And every breath from her answered yes. That night, Emma didn't just offer her body. She let go of her armor. He made love to her slowly, eyes never leaving hers. And when it was over, she lay on his chest, crying quietly. "You were the first, and I wouldn't change a thing," she whispered. Nate kissed her forehead and held her close. That night wasn't about sex. It was about surrender. And in that quiet, they both knew something had changed forever. It was a morning like any other. Sunlight poured through the mansion windows, and Emma was humming softly while making coffee. Nate came down the stairs smiling, watching her like he still couldn't believe his luck. Everything seemed too perfect. And maybe it was. Because the truth always finds a way to come to light. That afternoon, while looking for an old book in Nate's office, Emma stumbled upon a folder tucked behind some papers. Inside were printed emails, messages between Nate and his friends. Her name was there. She agreed to go out with me. I bet getting her to the altar will be easier than it looks. The world stopped. Her chest tightened with a pain she didn't know how to name. Her hands shook. Her throat went dry. That man, that love, that life had started with a bet. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just walked upstairs, packed a small bag, and left. Nate didn't notice until it was too late. He walked into the bedroom and found the empty bed. On the pillow, a single note. "Thank you for teaching me how to love. And for reminding me why I stopped trusting." The panic was instant. Nate searched the entire city, called every friend, checked every cafe, even went to Rusty Joe's. Nothing. It was like she had vanished. The mansion, once full of life, turned into a tomb of silence. He replayed every moment, every laugh, every hug. But what hurt the most was knowing that, even if he didn't mean to, he had become the villain in her story.